Disclaimer, this video is for educational purpose only. This is not the original content and all credits goes to respective owners. There is no copyright infringement intended. It is a recreation of TEDx Talk given by Clara Vuletich on how to engage with ethical fashion. All the media, video, music and symbols are just for the sake of making the video look like the original one. It is purely for academics and there is no monetization hence associated. In case of copyright ownership issues, please contact at the address given in the video description.
Hello everyone, hope you are doing well and in the best condition of health. We are the team Fethics going to present our communication skill project in which we have reenacted on the TEDx Talk How to Engage with Ethical Fashion by Clara Vuletich.
Now, our team will introduce ourselves. I am Madhuri Singh.
I am Sai Vanchu.
I'm Kainath Sharma.
I'm K. Sushmita.
I'm K. Bindushree.
I am Sampadas Pradhan.
First of all, we would like to thank our institute, NIT Raipur, and our Professor of Communication Skill, Dr. Anup Kumar Tiwari sir, for providing us this golden learning opportunity.
It provided us an exposure, experience, and insight on how to create a video with all the things required to make it effective.
Our team has done a lot of hard work for making this video. Hope you all like it.
We highly appreciate constructive criticism of our project so that we get to know about our shortcomings and do not repeat them in future. Let's start the video.
Fashion and sustainability, these are very two different things. Fashion is addictive, exclusive and very fast moving. Sustainability on the other hand is about slowness, care, flourishing and responsibility. It's fair to say that the fashion industry until very recently has not been sustainable. We are drowning in clothes and textiles. Cloth sales has increased dramatically in the last 20 years. Did you know that you have the 4 times the amount of clothes in your wardrobes than your parents did? And in UK, over 1 million tops of clothes goes into landfill every year. While we have more clothes in our wardrobes, we are not necessarily happier. Fast fashion has turned into these passive consumers who are constantly chancing the fantasy that buying more clothes will make us happy. As we know, people who make our clothes are often working in quite far away countries from us here in Australia in quite poor working conditions and paid very quite poorly. Look at what happened in Rana Plaza, the factory in Bangladesh in 2013. Over 1,000 people lost their lives while they are making clothes for the brands from the US and the UK. I have worked in the space as a designer and a researcher for almost 10 years. I have spoken to many of the designers, brand managers, suppliers, retailers and consumers, and there are a lot of figure-outing points that goes on. Consumers blame the brands for paying such low wages to often outsourced workers. Brands say that the price of their quality is so cheap because that the people want to pay. Activist organizations blame the brands for following such business models that prioritize profit all that cost, and governments often just watch cautiously from the sidelines.
So how can fashion and sustainability truly coexist? And how can all the people in this industry collectively work to transform the situation? Well, the good news is, I believe things are changing for the better. We are currently in a transition to a new type of fashion industry based on ecological and holistic principles, on closing the loop on materials that prioritizes community, values and respect of all the people in the supply chain. I recently went on a journey through the global supply chain to investigate these issues and to find some creative solutions. So the journey begins in my local neighborhood of the time in Brixton or in South London. I'm in the local community center there and I'm near a table surrounded by a group of women who are all hand sewing on their own garments with their needles and threads. I am there to teach them clothes mending and repair. I had brought all my favorite sewing equipments, my threads, my needles, my yarns and my favorite textiles. And I really wanted to create this creative and experiential and inspiring workshop in order to get people really engaging with their garments. So as the women sewed, we had quite a somber discussion about the impact of fast fashion on the people of our planet. And after the workshop finished, everyone packed up and we all went home. I walked home on foot. As I was walking what in the UK they call the high street, I noticed a group of 4 of the women from my workshop. And as I spotted them, I saw them go into a fast fashion shop. They were going shopping. I couldn't believe it. I really tried to make them talk to them and try to make them understand this careful, slow mending repair technique, and all they wanted to do was go with their girlfriends and have some fashion-related cheap fun. So it was in that moment that I really understood that in order to create systematic change in the industry, as a designer, as an activist, I really needed to understand behavior change. And rather than tinkering around at the edges, as a craft-based textile designer, as I had been doing,
I would need to go to the heart of the industry, from the global fashion brands to the global production center. So at about this time, I was luckily offered an opportunity to work with one of the largest fashion companies in the world. I'd been a part of one of the fantastic research teams in London, and we came up with a set of sustainability strategies for fashion and textile designers. So these strategies cover things like design for recyclability, how a designer can design for recycling, design on chemical impacts, design on water impacts, and also we give tips on how to be a designer activist. And we'd actually trailed these strategies with mainly student designers all over UK and Europe, but now was our opportunity to train professional designers in the heart of the industry. And when we are training designers to use these strategies, we get them to use a design garment from their past collection, something they've done, maybe a pair of denim jeans or an outdoor jacket, and they use these strategies to map the potential and social impacts of the garment. And they mask these strategies for the potentially lessen the impacts. So the garment design, so when we talk about garment impacts, we really need to consider about the life cycles. So the garment life cycle demonstrates the impacts across the whole life of the garment. It's got a very long life. It takes a lot to make a textile and then the garment. So it starts with the raw material phase, go through the production, fiber, shipping, and transport. When the consumer is wearing it, washing it, and then the end of the life. Whether you throw it in a bin or give it to the second-hand market. Then, when we are talking about the life cycles, we really need to consider that the type of fiber and the garment design and has different impacts. So a polyester dress will have very different impacts to a cotton t-shirt. For example, so let's take a cotton t-shirt. Cotton is one of the largest fiber group in the world. I bet many of you here are wearing cotton today. So cotton is grown using a huge amount of pesticides. Then say that in one cotton t-shirt, 500 grams of pesticides have been used. So that's one full handful per t-shirt.
Globally, we produce over 1 billion t-shirts. So an alternative to conventional cotton is organic cotton, and organic cotton is grown using no pesticides. But organic cotton is often 10 to 20% more expensive than conventional cotton, and there is often a shortage of yields. Particularly in the last 5 years, there has been a really great engagement from consumers and brands onto the issues of cotton. But it's meant that demand has outgrown supply. And someone may buy an organic cotton t-shirt, wear it few times or wear it many times, and then throw it in the bin. It may end up in landfill, and if the t-shirt has been dyed using toxic dyes, this may leak into the soil. And it often takes up to 200 years for a t-shirt to biodegrade. So it's complex. And there is no one solution when we are training designers to think about these issues. But when we are training them in sustainability thinking, we are actually training them to be life cycle thinkers, to consider the whole life of this garment. While I was training designers in this large company, I really began to reflect, and I really began to think about the idea that you can't force a designer to care, or anyone for that matter. Sustainability asks us as humans to consider really deep questions about our personal relationship to nature and the ethics of our actions. And the strategies I was using didn't really consider these deeper issues. And often in the workplace, even if our company has a large corporate responsibility program, we are not often encouraged to bring in our personal values to work. So I developed a really simple workshop tool, a simple card game, and some drawing techniques to make the designers thinking and talking about these issues. And so following these workshops in Europe, my research journey took me to China.
China is the global hub of textile and garment production. They sure know how to do this. I was interested to go to China to look at the workers' rights issues, particularly in garment production. Like many people from the West, I had some assumptions based on the notion of sweatshops about possibly how Chinese garment workers are treated and how they are paid. And I also knew that the methodology that these Western fashion brands use to justify their employment in China was to audit their factories. But I also knew that this wasn't working either. So I wanted to go to China to not just look at the problems, I wanted to come up with some creative solutions. And I wanted to co-design with workers and come up with a range of garments and product design. Well, that was a little hard and I didn't manage to pull that off. But what I realized in talking to workers and to many different stakeholders in China was that the assumptions I had earlier were not necessarily correct. A lot of production workers are women aged between 18 to 25. They have come from rural villages to work in factories in the city. They often do it for up to 3 to 5 years. They save a large amount of money to take back to their families. They also see the opportunity to potentially meet a husband in the cities, for example. And I also visited some factories, not all the factories in China, but the first thing I was impressed by was the sheer scale of these places. I don't know if anyone's been to these places, but they are amazing. And so I was sort of awed by the sheer scale of industrial production. Many of the factories were clean, the workers seemed to be safe and happy. So there was no resolution from my experience in China. I guess I didn't end up doing the creative project.
I actually just shared a simple textile printing technique with them. It sounds a bit funny, but I just felt that rather than trying to solve any problem, which I naively maybe I could, it was actually very lovely to just sit and share the creative process through textile. The journey ends with me coming back to London. I had been on the whirlwind journey through the global supply chain. I had worked with the designers in the heart of the industry in the Europe. Now I came back to the London. And the final project that I worked on was a jacket by hand. I spent 3 weeks on it and I hand stitched many pieces of small patchworks together. The Louis Bourgeois, the late French artist, talked about the act of hand stitching with thread and needles. As far as reparation, that the sewer is repairing something, bringing things back together, and it was this very simple and mindful act. It was able to bring as many aspects of research together and to make the sense of finding. So using mind and body, I literally stitched my way to the sustainable fashion. And we can choose better organic materials, we can choose better factories that has been audited and assessed. We can even try to change the behavior of the consumers through teaching them these mending techniques. But ultimately, sustainable fashion is about values. We have to decide what we value. A designer working in an organization, in order for them to engage with the company's CSR policy, they have to really get clear on their own personal values and to feel empowered. Equally, a young Chinese garment worker has her own set of values based on the culture of her life circumstances. We can't assume to know what she values, but we can collectively work to ensure that human employment's right to need are met.
And for us here in Australia, for the person who loves fashion and who shop, we have to decide how we expend our money and how we care for the clothes we already have. We have outsourced so much ourselves in the form of food and clothing. But now, it's time to bring things back home. It is easy to point finger at the brands for not having transparent supply chain or the government for not having landfill tax, for example. But we have to really take responsibility of our choices, and their survival ways we become more mindful lovers of fashion. The first thing I will say is, learn the simple art of hand stitching using needle and thread like they used to do it. It's really a good way to tune into your own inherent value system and your own creativity. We all have it in us. We have just lost that touch with clothing and fiber. It's lovely to go shopping on Saturday afternoon, and sometimes it does make us feel better and happier, but not always. I will say that most likely if you tune into your inner knowing, it will tell you what you really want to feel more connected to others or even to nature. So what else we can do? There are survival apps now in Australia that you can download onto your phone. They use a really simple rating system to rate clothing brands about their ethical practices. So we can really start to get more knowledgeable about the supply chain and feel empowered about how we are going to expand our money. I will also say that buy second-hand clothes, slap with your friends, and ultimately buy less. Very simple but very radical. We have become such consumer that we are not sure to use to that idea. And we have got such cheap clothing in our fingertips. So it turns out that I was on the right track that day in London, in the workshop, that the active hand stitching can make a world of difference. We all wear clothes, even we are not necessarily lovers of fashion, but we all wear clothes and we are all connected and responsible for the flourishing fashion industry. Thank you.